Hello everyone, this is Gamer1745 here, and I'm making a special episode. If you're new here, you can subscribe to the channel for more historical gaming videos. This is not one of them. This is a talk, not sure how brief it will be, but it is relevant to today. I am making this on April 2nd, and I'll be posting this very soon after it. So, and also hope it's earning a like. You hit that like button, and if you've listened to this, I'd love to hear your comments on what I'm going to say. Right, well, let's just read this. April 2nd, 1917, the U.S. President Wilson, who was not a good man, asked a special joint session of Congress to declare war on German Empire, saying that the war would make the world safe for democracy and be a war to end war. 4 days later, Congress obliged. It was only the fourth time it had declared war worldwide. This is from Nicholas Pye, Reverend Nicholas Pye, who made this tweet. Really don't know him. That isn't the point. And I'm really... this is an important idea here. And I think it's not looked at well enough. We can talk about the horrendous harassment of people with German names after, and it's Wilson. And yes, we will get a little political here, was a Democrat. Yes, he was a big racist. He was a big fan of Birth of a Nation, which was a Ku Klux Klan promoting movie. But he was also a very progressive president. To give a little bit, I'm not a big expert on the American home front, and I know a lot of you watching this will be surprised that there was no internet back when Wilson did this. So what he had to do, and the government did, is they hired people. They gave them a script, primarily men. I don't know if they hired women, but primarily men, to go on street corners and be basically a town crier, if you will, with messages to people, often ginning up anti-German hate, attacking anyone who was thought to be against the war, ginning up mobs to attack people. They didn't wear brown shirts, but it was a lot of that kind of tactic that Wilson was doing. And this is done exponentially greater than what was done during World War II in America against attacking those who weren't going along with the program. I just sort of want to give that as a backdrop to Wilson and his tactics and what we see today, right now, as I speak, over what you don't have a Ukrainian flag on your Twitter account or whatever. Don't you stand with Ukraine? It's just this really ginning up of war that we're seeing. And yes, I gotta say it because someone's going to accuse me if I don't. I'm totally against the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I thought something should have been done when Russia went into Crimea. But they didn't do something then, and it's become a problem now. So the two things that really, for America, even with all of the bad, a lot of good sort of comes out of World War I in that it really... And a lot of it doesn't necessarily require America joining the war, but American industrialization is very heavily, and the American farm sector, at least for a while, is very heavily helped by World War One, and it's not very costly for America. But it was these two elements here. It was make the world safe for democracy and war to end war. Now, I know in World War One and very much in World War Two that praise of democracy has become a very big thing. Well, yeah, I'm going to go there. I hate to tell you, democracy is not a good thing. Democracy is bad. Now, dictatorships can be a lot worse, okay? What I'm talking about is democracy. As Tim Pool likes to put it, democracy is two wolves and a lion not two wolves and a lamb deciding who gets to be eaten for lunch. Where a republic is an armed lamb who can contest the vote. And this is where this selling of democracy and making the world safe for democracy, the idea that democracy, and hi Marcel, Fritz, I see you there, but we're going to continue here. The idea that democracy is a good value in and of itself is not a good thing. Now, democratic representation within a republic is a great thing, okay? See, a republic, as we sort of know it today, I mean, there's all kinds of republics throughout the history of mankind, but a res publica, a republic, not a dictatorship, Fritz, who probably wants one of those, but a republic, like a constitutional federal republic. It is a structured set of government that within it there's democratic representation, there's voting. That is a good thing. What you can have, make the world safe for democracy. Remember, Hitler's elected. Hitler comes to power democratically. Okay? Hitler comes to power democratically. First, the Nazi Party, they don't get a majority vote in Reichstag, but they're the biggest party. There's no majority. They're the biggest party, and they, I forget the exact initials. I think it's the DNP, but doesn't matter. Franz von Pappen's party, which is a smaller right-wing minority party. A classical conservative right wing, would like the Kaiser back and like to, a constitutional monarchy, shall we say, as opposed to a constitutional republic. These guys, the sort of traditionalist Germans, get in the alliance and, get Hitler in there. But then there's later voting going on, and there's irregularity, shall we say. It's not quite what we would see as a free and fair voting, but he is multiple votes that I do believe that the overwhelming voting majority does vote for Hitler. And hello, Lum. So just the idea that you have a democracy, that you form a democracy. You can look at whether like forming it in Iraq or trying to form it in Afghanistan. Just because you put a process in place that is a democratic process does not mean you will get good ends, okay? Good governance is important. Okay, so yeah, if you have a constitutional monarchy, like England does today, you can have good governance. I'm not saying everywhere should be a constitutional monarchy or anything like that, but you can have good governance. So the idea that democracy, you want to make the world safe for democracy, and majority tyranny is what often happens. The majority gets into power. We can see this in different areas in the United States, whatever political side you may be on. Sometimes you'll like it, sometimes you won't. They sort of rig the system. The group gets into power. They rig the system so that they stay into power through democratic votes. And you see states not, that stay all Republican, and sure, there's a few Democrats that get elected, but nowhere is there ability to get a majority flipped over for a long, long time. So with democracy, you can have majority tyranny. I am against tyranny from any form of government, whether it's a dictator or a majority. Because a lot of dictators do realize they're playing to the majority of their people. Not always, but a lot of times they're like get on the side of the majority and do it. So the idea of making the world safe for democracy. But okay, let's even take that as a good thing. There wasn't much democracy after World War II. Now, was there? Japan certainly wasn't a democracy. China certainly wasn't a democracy. Those were both sides on the Allies fighting against the Central Powers. Okay, briefly, for about 10 years, there was democracy in Germany. But then that goes away. So it definitely didn't make it safe in there. There really isn't much of a democracy in Austria, in Hungary, in Romania. Not terribly much of a democracy in Poland. Popular dictator there. Now that's a country being squeezed from, multiple sides. There certainly wasn't any democracy in the Bolshevik Soviet Union. So, is Italy a democracy? Well, what was it, 1922? Mussolini does his march on Rome and sort of ends democracy in Italy. So, if the stated goal of America coming into the war in World War I, one of them was to make the world safe for democracy, there certainly wasn't a lot of democracy breaking out after World War I. That's for sure. And that's one of the goals. So that, to me, clearly fails. America's democracy was never in doubt in World War I. Yeah, there's the Zimmerman telegram that we're trying to hey, well, if Mexico, you want to join the war, we'll support you, and you attack America, we'll negotiate, one of our negotiating things, we'll try to get your land back that you lost. Yeah, that wasn't going to happen. Mexico wasn't even going to think about doing that. It was more of the Britain, tapped into the telegraph lines, because a lot of them went through Britain, and decoded the message and gave it to the Americans. I believe very much so that it was a real, hey, well, why don't you offer these Mexicans to do this thing, trying to sort of get another Ottoman Empire, another weak man of the world to join the Central Powers, as it were. But I don't think it was serious, really, on anybody's side. But Britain made as much as it could out of it to try to get another ally into the war. But America's democracy, or America's government, was never in doubt or in question or whatever. So, yeah, American ships had been torpedoed, and Germany, wrongly in my opinion, and Germany put up unrestricted warfare. And you can talk, legitimately, you can talk about sitting, outside of territorial waters, but in the region of an enemy country, and sinking ships coming to that country. But when they're out in the Atlantic, way out in the Atlantic, who knows if that ship is going to go to Britain or if it's going to go to Norway or to Denmark, which are at peace, or Spain, which was at peace. So the American shipping, was just out in the ocean. And yeah, a lot of it was going to Britain and France, bringing over passengers or war material. But still, it was wrong of Germany to sink American ships that weren't near British ports. Yeah, I know it sort of puts Germany at a disadvantage, but still, it was wrong for Germany to do it, and it was stupid of them to agree to stop doing it, and then to start doing it again. Saying, "Well, we're changing our minds." That just, that really pissed America off. So yeah, it wasn't to do that. Now, war to end war. This is a progressive's idea of the world. The progressives believe that, not like technological progress, and we can look, at least in the Western world, there is some, I would say, cultural progress going on, in that slavery, which was a common condition in humanity prior to 1750. I'll be fairly safe that humanity, from China to Native Americans, as they like to be called now, in North and South America, but definitely also in North America, took slaves. Africans took slaves of each other. India, their very rigid caste system. I don't know if they technically had slaves, probably debt slaves, but I don't know. So, and of course, Arabs taking slaves. They were theoretically unable to take other Muslims as slaves. I say theoretically. So they would raid other parts of the world for slaves. So it was a common condition. Oh, yes, and Europeans too. But most Europeans, they're not the major slave takers in the history of humanity, or at least the latter Europeans taking African slaves, I should say, because Roman Empire, huge amounts of slaves. Yeah, so there is a little bit, but the idea that wars are going to end, well, because we have conflicts in ideas, conflicts around that we can see today, like in Ukraine. Wars are not going to end. So if you have somebody who claims that we're going to fight this war to end wars, I mean, that's what he sold to the American people. Germany didn't think they were fighting the war to end all wars. Britain and France didn't think they were fighting the war to end wars. It was just the latest war. This is Wilson's idea of what to do, why to go in and fight this. And those that are advocating for NATO, now I understand why Ukrainians, and I actually talk to one or two Ukrainians once in a while, as in the last few days, giving me little updates on what they're experiencing. And of course they would like to see, NATO help, directly enter the war. And I don't blame them for wanting it, but all the rest of people in NATO countries or whatever thinking we should enter the war, they don't understand the nature of what's going on. Because a no-fly zone is directly entering the war, because you, like I've said in my video on it, the first thing you do for a no-fly zone is you attack all anti-aircraft emplacements, missiles and whatnot that could possibly be fired at your aircraft, which would be attacking units inside of Russia, as well as units inside of Ukraine. So it would be a direct attack on Russia. And a lot of the Americans and Europeans are so used to our neo-colonial wars in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Mali, other North African countries, southern half of the Sahara, but countries that the French have been doing and have recently withdrawn from. I think it was Mali, or was it Niger? I forget which. To let the Wagner Group, the Russian mercenaries, take over. Interesting little tidbit about that in the last few weeks or so, weeks, that they pulled out. The French pulled out entirely, turned over all their bases to the Wagner Group because they weren't going to keep operating alongside the Wagner Group. Wagner Group, like I say, is Russian mercenaries. That those countries, yeah, there was 9/11. I know that triggers some people here, Hylam, but that they have attacked into the West. But they don't mostly, they don't threaten global nuclear war, the ability to have it, where Russia and China, as well as the U.S., and then maybe sort of, I don't think France and Britain could really nuke the globe. I mean, they could nuke anywhere on the globe because they have some nuclear submarines to get near enough and launch some missiles at a thing, but they can't take out the whole globe. It's really U.S., Russia, and China that can do so. So you really have to watch going into a war, and this is what I'm worried about here. It's like I'm saying, I'm making this on April 2nd, the U.S. declaring war here, and neither one of these two things, even though they won, neither one of these two goals, and goals that have for sure make the world safe for democracy in World War II. They didn't really sell us the war to end all wars or whatever in World War II, because that was clearly not the case here. And just on this day, spoke to Congress as just another person doing this stuff. War against Germany, neutrality is no longer feasible or desirable where the peace of the world is involved. 86% members voted in favor of the U.S. entering the war formally on April 6th. So it took them a few days to discuss the request, but I also, neutrality is no longer feasible or desirable where the peace of the world is involved. And you can see how both of these things can be, that I'm worried that Biden or Zelensky or somebody else will get up on a stage, because all I'm hearing about is Madman Putin or war criminal Putin. Is declaring war a crime? Not necessarily. Have there been war crimes in the Ukrainian war? Probably. Are there but all it takes is one person to go commit a crime in the middle of a war, and it becomes a war crime. Again, I'm not in favor or supportive of Russia's invasion. I believe it is wrong. I believe it is a bad thing. I do believe that the West should sell. I would prefer that they sell them. Then you can pay us later, sort of lend-lease kind of selling. Not lend-lease as in lend them the weapons and get leases for bases. We shouldn't be looking for bases in Crimea or Ukraine generally, or Crimea or whatever, but that region. But, but the idea of, hey, we'll give you the weapons today, pay us sometime in the future, but, officially put down that they owe us the money. That way it makes weapons sales and not giving weapons. And you can see this is taken from two different sides of the same room. two photos. I'm all for having weapon systems, and laws and whatnot, and stingers and whatnot, all being sent into Ukraine. I think that's perfectly fine and legitimate. And if China wants to sell weapons or give weapons to Russia to go fight, yeah, that's fine. Some country is supporting. I don't support it, but it's not an act of war for China to give weapons to Russia to go use them. But this war criminal Putin, this madman Putin talk, I'm worried that it is going to be, no longer feasible or desirable when the peace of the world is involved, that we must get into this Crimea. Or just keep saying Crimea, because I'm thinking of the peninsula there too. This Ukrainian war. That is not going to have a good outcome if NATO gets involved. So please, everyone, this is an important lesson to learn. The stated goals of World War I were not achieved, even though the Allies were victorious. So be careful when you go into a war. Now, going into Afghanistan, well, they harbored wasn't really a nation state, but they harbored an NGO, non-government organization called the Taliban, that attacked the U.S., so they got attacked back. There's reasons to go to war, and I will support national interest. There needs to be a national interest, and it is not to make the world safe for democracy or to end wars, or just because the world is at war. Now, when the Nazis, Hitler, that was a different show, meaning Germany was not really trying to take over the world. It was trying to get a little more territory in the West and a bunch more territory in the East. Yeah, and, Austria-Hungary was, slowly encroaching down into the Balkans and had their Archduke assassinated. So, it wasn't a world conquest war, at least by the supposed aggressors or by the losers of the war. And so neither is Putin is not trying to conquer the world. He is not Hitler number 2. He is trying to rebuild the old Soviet boundaries. I do believe that he wants to go beyond Ukraine, but he is not trying to conquer Paris or London. Oh, also, did you know, everyone? Here's the kicker. Who's at war? I don't know if anybody in chat, who other than Ukraine, not a non-European country, who's at war with Russia right now? Who is at war with Russia? Can anybody in chat tell me who's at war, literally at war with Russia? You've heard of the country. No one can tell me who's at war with Russia. Yes, Martik got it. Japan. They had been for a long, long time in theoretical negotiations over, they never got the peace treaty signed after World War II over the Sakhalin Islands and island and a couple other little islands up there. And because of the situation in Ukraine, negotiations broke down and have stopped. And when you stop negotiating, that means technically you're back at war, because I think it would be something considered a ceasefire and then negotiating. Japan is now back at war with Russia. I want to read. Yeah, but sadly, most people aren't virtuous enough and are easily manipulated to behave in a certain way. Yes, absolutely. There's mass psychology. I've just taken a college course on it way back whenever, that dealt, or at least part of the course dealt with mass psychology. So no expert, but mass psychology and the internet and radios and whatever all play into the situation. So I'm just worried. I'm seeing parallels. I see parallels in previous histories. People say, history really doesn't repeat itself. It just rhymes. Well, however you want to fucking say it, it's history repeats. Not, exactly, just because we declared war on Germany last 2 times, we'll accidentally declare war on Germany again. Just, oh shit, we're so used to declaring it on Germany. No, it may not be exactly the same thing, but I see the same trend here, and seeing how this is maybe a day or two. I'll release this after. I know I'm making it live here for those who watch the end of the live stream here, but it'll be released between April 2nd and April 6th is when these happened. And I see the same pressures, the same, if you will, do-gooder people in Washington, D.C. that are blaming an enemy and trying to make virtuous sounding noises that could get us into another war. And I think it's dangerous. I don't think they know what they're playing with. So I thank you all for watching. Thanks, Martik, for your input there. I do appreciate it. And hey, if you have any comments, questions, and tell me why I'm wrong. I mean, if you're civil, I love for you, the change my mind thing. Yeah, change my mind. But I don't think you will. I mean, I'm open to it if you give me good enough facts. But post below, like it. If you're new here, please subscribe. Thank you so much.